justice. There's no right to reparation or right to truth. And the UN very recently has looked at memorialization and has characterized it even as a fifth pillar of transitional justice. So it's a non-judicial mechanism of justice, which is, I think, important not only as a pillar in itself, but it's in its relation to the different other mechanisms in transitional justice. And there are different forms of memorialization. Maybe we'll talk about them more in the following discussion.
Thank you. And Nanajo, as you are a Gambian and working there, could you situate the context of this West African country and explain us what happened until 2017 and how you perceive memorialization in this context?
So absolutely, so thank you very much. First, so Gambia is a small West African country that finds itself surrounded by Senegal, and it has a population of about 2 million, and it's known as the Smiling Coast of Africa. And behind this nickname, there is a history of 22 years of dictatorship under the regime of Yahya Jammeh, which was marked by gross human rights violations such as enforced disappearances, extrajudicial killings, torture, rape, arbitrary arrests. And in January 2017, Jammeh fled to Equatorial Guinea after losing the December 2016 presidential election to main opposition candidate Adama Barrow. And the new government under Adama Barrow, sought to set the country on a new democratic course. And with that aim in mind, put in place a transitional justice process. And they established what is called the Truth, Reconciliation, and Reparations Commission, and known very well under the acronym TRRC, which also comes with its own set of issues, in my opinion. And we can, I'll go into more details about this later. So for us at ANEKED, we realized that the transitional justice process in the Gambia was mostly focusing on exactly this mechanism, the Truth, Reconciliation, and Reparations Commission, and no other mechanisms. And additionally, generally speaking, memorization is often a neglected aspect in the consolidation of transitional justice. And like Mina just pointed out, even the UN recently made it a fifth pillar of transitional justice. So for us, we saw that it's something that does not also necessarily is not necessarily restricted to truth commissions. It can happen outside of their recommendations. So us as a civil society organization, we embarked on this memorization project, the Duty to Remember, in close collaboration with victims, with the aim of opening a memorial center / museum in the Gambia to commemorate the victims of forced disappearances and extrajudicial killings under Yahya Jammeh. Because it's very often, you know, their humanity is easily forgotten to just become numbers and statistics, and not living and breathing human beings that were loved and I actually missed. So the memorization project, or the opening of this memorial center in the Gambia, is actually the first of its kind in the country. And it's also in line with the recommendations of the UN Special Rapporteur on, bear with me because the name is long, promotion of truth, justice, reparations, and guarantees of non-recurrence. And this follows his preliminary observations from his official visit to the country, where he noted that there was actually a lack of initiative taken by the government in this field, in the field of memorization. And he actually highlighted the importance of such an initiative because it's a form of satisfaction to victims, but also it's a guarantee of no recurrence for society. It's a way of remembering and not erasing what happened and just say, okay, let's start, this is a clean slate. And then, you know, let's pretend that we're having a walk in the park right now.
Thank you. And Mina, even though you already told us that memorialization is part of a transitional justice process, Could you tell us how it is linked and expound on the transitional justice definition, please?
Thank you. So yeah, transitional justice is known to encompass different forms of justice, which are important when you are in a society that has come out of political violence or which has suffered conflict, an armed conflict. So that's the classical conception, a justice response, which you would see as judicial, but also non-judicial. There are two different forms of these. And there are mechanisms that mostly are formal, but we've also seen informal mechanisms. And in memorialization initiatives, you see quite a lot of that. And well, these forms of justice, as Nana Jo was saying, are forms of memorialization is a form or can be seen as a form of symbolic reparation. Reparation symbolic in the sense that it's non-material, but at the same time, other forms of reparation can be seen as symbolic also. But it's an important form of reparation for victims because it acknowledges their suffering. And it's also important for society, not only because of the prevention aspect, not only because it's a guarantee of non-recurrence, but also because it's a way of publicly acknowledging crimes that were maybe committed also in the name of a certain society. So it's a way of having this publicly acknowledged and not just having a knowledge of the crimes in a given society that is in a transition.
Thank you. Nana Jo, do you have anything to add to this?
What I would like to say is that it's I'm trying to find the right words to make sure that it makes sense. It's really, so memorization obviously involves memorials, and they are the act itself. It's a way we remember to remember, if it makes sense. So it's a form of commemoration, and it anchors our collective past and present. For me, and then a collective past and present, and how to move forward, because I believe that you cannot move forward if you don't know your past. And it also provides a framework for experience. It forces people to, just like Mina says, or to remember, reflect on what happened. It also forces us to reflect on how we remember. Are we going to remember this as a time where it was just a small population that was affected? Do you remember how when we say a small population, in Africa, when you have one person affected by something, it actually affects. It's not that idea of family where it's just mother, father, and then you have two children. It's not the same concept. You actually affect maybe 15, 20 people. You actually affect communities. Also in the context of the Gambia, where people live together tightly knit, and you still have some people who live with their perpetrators around. It's essential to be able to move forward. And it's also a way of reminding people about the injustices that took place, and to make sure that they're not minimalized in any sort of way.
Yes, thank you. I have another question for you, Nana Jo. If you could tell us why memorialization is important as a justice response for victims, but I know that the virtual exhibition called The Duty to Remember in Geneva already took place in person in the Gambia. Could you maybe tell us more about the reaction of the population there?
Sure, it's so memorialization is a fairly new concept in the Gambia, and I would dare to say that in many African countries as well. And so for Gambians, it was very much a breath of fresh air. They were very excited. They thought this was so much needed. The way we went about this, like I said, we collaborated with victims. It wasn't just we took their names down and then we listened to their stories and then we just moved on. It was really, some of them we would ask them, who do you think, who else should we speak to, who should we contact, how can we get in touch with them? Some of them provided us lists of people and actually made the phone calls to let them know, hey, this is what is going on, this is what's I've just participated in this. So it was amazing to see how they were not just passive, they were very much active and part of this. And then for them to attend as well the opening night and to see the reaction from people, from passers-by, because we put a huge banner outside the event where it was going to take place. So people actually were stopping cars to look at a huge banner where you see like so many faces and women faces. I guess they were not expecting that. And so, and have, you know, even the media, they're writing about how this was so important. Because in Gambia, it was as if the story of Gambia or Gambians was just so tightly knit to just colonization. You know, you would have there is a museum in Gambia, but it's, you know, when you visit it, it's very, you have maybe 2-3 sections on colonization, as if that's when Gambia started to exist. And with this one, it's just, it was actually Gambians telling their stories. It wasn't from outsiders. It was also how you also want to be perceived. Sorry. I'm sure everyone here would know that many, if you look at how stories about Africa are written, it can be very infuriating sometimes, or how stories of people who've gone through tragedies are told, and there's completely dehumanizing. And with this sense, it was trying to create, give Gambians this idea of like, this is what can be done and how it would benefit the future generation. So that was the response was extremely positive. The place where we hosted it actually said that they were receiving phone calls after from people thanking them some people who had attended the opening night, or people who had seen it on TV covered by the media, who were saying that they thought this was just amazing. And I just wanted to add that it was also, for me, I went back and I saw there was a group of students with the teachers who were actually visiting and looking at these items that were on display and reading the stories. And you could tell how they were just mesmerized. They hadn't seen something like that, anything like that before.
Thank you for sharing your experience. Mina, would you like to discuss maybe other examples? Otherwise, I have another question for you.
Actually, I wanted to ask a question to Nana Jo, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
It's about the format of this exhibition and what were the types of formats that victims or people whom you talked, whom you consulted, privileged the most. Was it more about photographs, or was it narratives? How did they want their voices to be included?
It was definitely oral. People loved talking and sharing the experience. I think there's nothing more empowering than to share your story and to have someone listen to it. So it was just listening. They felt that, for many as well, they felt that they hadn't been able to truly speak their minds, say truly what had happened to them, or, you know, when they were sharing the stories, they had to tailor what they had to say to filter what they were saying. And there was really, we created this safe space where, like, just let loose, just say what truly happened to you. And I think it goes a lot more with just African culture in general. It's oral storytelling. We like to share. People would sit around in the villages, around like a fire. In Gambia, you have what is called the bantaba, where it's, you know, it's a huge tree in the middle of a small community. Sometimes it's a village, and that's where people go and they have talks and stuff. So they've very much privileged that. And for us, the element as well of photography was to freeze that in time. This is what happened, and we, you know, they came back. We shared pictures with them. We gave them their pictures. They were very happy to have pictures of themselves. But it was definitely oral, to be able to just share your experience. And we felt very privileged when we were doing this with them.
Thank you. And Mina, why is memorialization important for social reconstruction? And what do we mean by social reconstruction?
So that's a big question. Well, first of all, I think memorialization, just to give you a brief idea, has been attached to several objectives, one of them being social reconstruction. There's also acknowledgement. It can be about truth-telling, contributing to truth-telling, but also prevention, as we were mentioning before. And social reconstruction is an important aspect because it has to do with dealing with the destruction of the social fabric. When you have had in the case of Gambia, a context in which there's been an authoritarian government, repression, the social ties are destroyed. The social fabric is destroyed. And this has to be dealt with at different levels of society. You need to deal with justice, but you need to deal also with democracy. Economic prosperity is an important one, but also reconciliation. And here, reconciliation would be seen as a kind of an outcome that we may get to one day. But social reconstruction really deals with different levels of society. And it's very important in terms of memorialization to think about social reconstruction because it also implies a fundamental change in attitudes, in beliefs, but also in relationships. Relationships may have to be rethought. Depending on the context, of course. In the case of a divided society after a protracted conflict, it's even more the case. And probably in Gambia, you have a situation where you may not have such entrenched divisions, which is good news, I would say, for memorialization, because it's, I don't want to say it's easier to have a memorialization initiative, but at least you don't have to deal with maybe such divisive identities when thinking of finding some kind of a common sense of the past, a common ground on which you can build a new society once we've gone, you know, now that you're in a transition to a new government. And this also means having this idea of social reconstruction means also thinking of common objectives for the future, coexistence at various levels, not only economic, if possible, and social cohesion, tolerance. And an important one is trust. Finding trust, rebuilding trust between citizens and the state. And memorialization can also be a way to open up a debate, to start a recognition. It can start with memorialization and then move on to different other processes of justice. It can be a stepping stone, and it can be a process in itself, which is extremely important.
If I may just come in here, I wanted to say that actually, so in the Gambia, there was a report that was done by the Afrobarometer, which showed that 1 in 4 Gambians had been a victim of the regime. That is extremely high, especially when you have, it's a small country with a population of 2 million. I've heard instances of people speaking, going somewhere and talking and realizing, oh my goodness, I just spoke to someone and it turns out he was a victim, or and it could be direct victim or indirect victim, i.e. his father, his brother, or a relative disappeared, or his relative was tortured or detained incommunicado for X amount of years. And when you detain someone like that, I mean, he might or might not be the breadwinner, but in the case that he is the breadwinner of the family, you've actually completely impacted the family. Also, what you're seeing in the Gambia is, and that's why it's also, I think, one of the reasons why Gambia has the name of the smiling coast of Africa, is that forgiveness has long been part of the social fabric of the country. Different ethnic groups were coexisting peacefully, and different as well religions, like Christians, Muslims, whatever you decided to believe in. And this profoundly was affected during the regime of Yahya Jammeh, where there started being a bit of tension in terms of like tribalism. Like he is from one tribe, and that tribe who had felt historically like ostracized or left out or something like that, was feeling like now it's their time, right? So you already have, it's very important. That's why we're trying to make sure making sure people remember, because in Gambia there's already that whole thing about forgiveness, and that's why different ethnic groups were coexisting peacefully. And also there's the narrative, it relies a lot, well, when you see, I'm going back to the TRRC, so the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission, using a lot of like religion as a tool to have people to say, yes, I forgive, not necessarily understanding what forgiveness is. So for me, I mean, for us at ANEKED, this project as well, it's definitely part of social reconstruction, but it's really trying to make sure that nobody comes along and tries to rewrite history, or you have like, or the victor comes out and gets to tell his story and erasing it, what actually happened. It's for us is making sure this is there, and then it's creating this space for dialogue. Because if there's 1 in 4 Gambians, and some people said they were also like, there were family members who took part in violating their human rights. So and then there are people who live in small communities and they see their perpetrators. How do you move from that? And also it's forcing Gambians to look at what happened. I mean, people, when you talk about it, and that's my experience as well, people said people around them left them. People did not call, people did not write to find out how they were doing. If you had a problem with Yahya Jammeh, people just abandoned you. And that hurt itself in saying, like, it wasn't just my government, it's also my community, my people who left me, who abandoned me. And I had to go through this by myself.
And Nana Jo, tell me if I'm wrong, but in the Gambia, as said before, there was not any conflict among the population. Everyone could have been a target of persecution. However, some people are still supporting today Yahya Jammeh and indirectly his political party. In this sense, do you think memorialization could create a division among communities?
For me, it doesn't create division. It's like I said, the aim of this is creating a space for dialogue. and also is not necessarily trying to change their minds, because I cannot control that. Human beings are funny creatures. But it's really about the people who this happened to. That's who we're focusing on. It's for them to have their stories out there. And again, if it's there, it's difficult to erase. And I'm telling you my story with the hope that you will be willing to come to the table to listen. But when you're faced with all of this as well, it's very difficult for you to look away. You're also forced to reflect and to think and to be like, oh, this is what happened. Okay, I see where this person's coming from. So like I said, it is creating a space for dialogue. I do not see how it would create division. It's people telling their stories. And yes, you will have people who would not want to believe those stories. We cannot control them. We cannot control that. But a lot of the times when you have, because the government, well, I know that the TRRC is already looking into, memorization projects when the TRRC is over, which would be about around maybe April 2021. And you'll have the government put in place these, memorials, and we want to make sure that victims are not forgotten, because when you look at different in a lot of different instances, victims can easily be forgotten. The state has this desire to construct this grand project, and then the role of victims is often ignored, or it's more about the agenda they have, like wishing to stamp their understanding. They're having to stamp their understanding on the greater collective, or the understanding of the past, on the greater collective. So for us, when it's not divisive, it's really, it's there. This is it, it's just there. So you either want to have that discussion. We're not trying to accuse or attack anybody, but it's really trying to make sure that the stories are told. And there's a lot of power in telling stories, in exposing truth.
Thank you. Mina, maybe do you have any other examples in your perspective? How can we ensure that memorial do not preserve and even reinforce the division that have led to violent conflict or to authoritarian regime?
That's a big question. Okay, maybe I'll start with following up on what Nana Jo just said, because we're talking in the case of the exhibition that Nana Jo was talking about. It's an informal, in the sense, an unofficial initiative of memorialization, and there is these plans from the state to come up with memorialization also. And I think here one of the first I would say issues I see is that in the case of a civil society initiative, you can bring this element of inclusion, you can have this dialogue, and it's a very important I would say form of memorialization that needs to be there. But at some point you need official recognition from the government, right? As Nana Jo was saying, we need to be able to debunk myths. We need to be able to have this story there, and which cannot be denied anymore. These victimizations cannot be denied anymore, these violations. And so this element of state acknowledgement is important, but this is where often, unfortunately, state-led forms of memorializations can come up with also narratives that are important for the state, that are politically important, that are there to justify the state's governance and having nation-building purposes and so on. Now, when we think of what is important in memorialization practices, it depends also on the context we're talking about. And I think here I will maybe stay on the context which are similar to Gambia, in the sense of societies that are coming out of a situation of repression, authoritarian governance, and here the importance of sites, I think, has to be also highlighted. So sites of torture, for example, sites where people were detained, because these are sites, these are material places which, which allow, I would say several things. Number one, they allow to not deny that this happened anymore, officially, because it's in the public. Everybody can see it. You can go past it and you see it. It's there. If there's a plaque, that's even better. And actually, there have been in a lot of countries movements of civil society actors who have struggled to have these places recognized in Chile and in many other places. And so this element of the sites, I think, for these types of contexts is really important. These sites are also important because they can be places of mourning for victims. Because in the case of enforced disappearances, for example, and I think in Gambia this is the case, many people have not found their loved ones. There is no place of burial or place where they can even find remains. So these sites can be a place where they can come gather and mourn their loved ones on a very individual level too. And then another aspect, I think, that in these contexts that is really that can be really important. And again, this depends on the political willingness to acknowledge violations. But if you're in a situation where you have a government who is not acknowledging these violations of the past, and who's denying these, or maybe denying part of these for a part of the population, one way of also being able to get these experiences acknowledged is through the internet, through virtual platforms where you can have exhibitions of photographs, or you can have oral histories. There are many examples of this type of memorialization. And the last thing I want to say is that I think memorialization is, in many cases, has been a struggle for collectives, and civil society actors are extremely important here to keep these memories there out, even when they are not acknowledged completely by official actors. And this also allows for this social recognition of these memories, allows also for a certain pressure to be put at the level of governments. It's not always the case, of course, but I think it's a great, this exhibition is a great initiative, and I really hope it's going to create like a kind of a snowball effect in Gambia at that level.
Thank you, Mina. Now we have a question from the public. So thank you, Nanajo, for the work you're doing to create a platform for survivors in the Gambia. It seemed that these are untold stories, and the media had not provided adequate spotlight of the impact of the regime. Could you speak to the justice aspect? In telling their stories, do survivors have a greater chance of being heard by justice actors for action? You have to turn on your microphone.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you for this question. What I have to say is that there have been, and that also closely follows what Mina was just discussing. With the TRRC, people, so the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission, people have, witnesses have come forward, and not just perpetrators, but also victims, and they've told their stories. And it has absolutely captivated the country. People pause, people watch, people are completely mesmerized. The media in Gambia, to me, still has some room for improvement. So I think the way some of the stories are told after, through the radio or paper or online, are not necessarily. I think it could be better, in the sense that some of them focus so much on the atrocities, and I'm not trying to take away from that. It is important that these atrocities are there, and the government cannot deny that this or that did not happen. It's there. People are saying it happened, but it's also it's focusing so much on the atrocities, and there's this lack of sensitivity that it kind of like, I think, re-traumatizes or re-victimizes the victims. Some people read about these stories. Some relatives did, find out when they about what other loved ones, like what happened, and it's focusing so much more on the act, on the atrocity, rather than on the impact of the others. And that's where, for us, we've come through. It's really more the impact that we're discussing, what happened and the impact, rather than the act itself. Now, in terms of the question is, in telling the stories, do survivors have a greater chance of being heard by justice actors for action? It's adding to the narratives, and is ensuring that people understand, because you can be easily stigmatized in Gambia when you are asking for justice. People are like, but why are you asking for justice? You should forgive and move on. And it's letting people understand why you're saying that someone should be held accountable for their actions. So for me, it definitely does contribute to that. It also offers a balanced view of different stories, because what happened in the case of the Gambia, we almost find ourselves in a situation where wrong has become almost excusable. Nobody is saying that it did not happen. People will say it happened, but then they will be like, okay, let's move on. And those who are culpable call themselves innocent, or they deflect responsibility, and they can even be glorified after appearing before the Truth Commission. In this regard, I'll give you an example where one perpetrator extrajudicially and forcibly disappeared people. He appeared before he was then made, the Yahya Jammeh and others turned on him, and he was arrested and really tortured, I think, for maybe 9 years. And so he told his story, and he, for me, it baffled me when I saw how, people, and including the commissioners, or one, I would say the commissioners, sorry, the counsel who was interviewing him, shed a tear when he was telling his story. And you had all these victims before, who had not participated in crimes or anything, who told their stories. And those stories were not, people had completely forgotten. And this people was almost celebrated. Oh, he's amazing. Look at how he came before the TRRC and he told the truth, how he admitted all these crimes he committed. But then after he was badly tortured, and victims say that they see him driving a car, absolutely comfortable with everything, but not necessarily helping people find the location of the remains of the loved ones. People come and they understand how the system works, if I may say. So you come and you say, I'm sorry. And then there's this expectation that you will be forgiven. So I think that with this, it's very important why these stories are adding again to the narrative, and for people to understand when they're coming out and saying, no, I think it's very important for me to we should hold this person accountable. And even if I've forgiven, because I personally think forgiveness is personal, it's a gift to yourself. It's something that you just say, yes, this happened. It's not, but it doesn't exonerate a perpetrator. It doesn't justify the actions of a perpetrator. So I think you have to be made accountable, especially for certain crimes that are absolutely heinous. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you for your answer. I have another question from the public for you. What has been the interaction with the TRRC on this question of memorialization? The TRRC mandate is coming to an end soon. There are so many expectations. Do you think memorialization can have its place in the TRRC recommendation for measures to be taken to formalize that?
So, I mean, the TRRC is very much aware of our of this project. They were invited to the opening night. There was actually a representative. They mentioned it. They commended our work. So, like, it's not been the TRRC has not seen the work that we're doing as, if I may say, like a threat or a problem. They've been very nice about it, and I know that they're working on recommendations, and for the recommendations in terms of symbolic reparation, and as part of that, they're looking into memorialization, like memorials. This could be public holidays. These could be physical memorials. So they are working on that, and they actually had a consultation meeting, and they consulted with civil society organizations. But my worry is if it feels as if it's almost, because it's a checkbox, they're just rushing through it. It's not thought through well enough. And I feel like, and my team as well felt like some were a bit dismissive. They were just like, this is the way it should be done, and this is the way we should do it, and that's it. So I think there will be a need for more consultation, but I know that they have plans of making recommendations to have, and they're looking into memorialization. Like I said, the reason why we went ahead is because you can do it outside of the TRRC. It doesn't need to be recommendations from the TRRC. And we, by having different actors engaging in this process as well, you offer a more balanced view and actually a diversity of types of memorials that are out there. So with this one, it's virtual for now, and it allows us to go beyond the Gambia, but the whole point is to open an actual physical museum in the Gambia for people to visit, and for it to be there for Gambians. And this will be something made by just Gambians, for them, and for Gambians to take ownership of this. I do hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Nana Jo. Thank you also, Mina, for your answer. Now, I would like to discuss broader challenges related to memorialization as a means to promote social reconstruction in transitional justice settings. Mina, please explain us what could be challenging, and if you have any example, even from other countries.
Okay, well, there are many challenges we can think of, but I think the first question when you're thinking of implementing a memorialization initiative is why are you doing this? For who are you going to be doing this? And who's going to be, who's going to be using this initiative? And the question of inclusion is very important here. Are we going to be able to include everybody's voices? How do you, to a certain extent, how do you make it inclusive enough, plural enough, but then at the same time keeping this complexity, the complexity of victimizations? Because in Gambia, and I think in other contexts, you have victims, but you have also victims who were perpetrators. How does one compile all this into a, well, not one narrative, but maybe several narratives that are coexisting, that are together? And how does one not simplify it? I think this is really an important element. The second, I would say, aspect, I think that is a challenge in memorialization, is the fact that memorialization is often done for there's always a need, a political or a social need. There's always a reason for this. And in these cases, victims are acknowledged, of course. They're being defined also, so inclusion, exclusion. They are constructed, but they're also denied. And this aspect is really important, and it's completely part of the politics of memorialization, the political instrumentalization of memorialization, of memory. And here, even if it's not an official initiative, it can be a risk, because you can have certain victim constituents who may want their experiences to be put forward compared to others. Because memorialization helps groups also to construct and to maintain a victim status, a status as such. And in the case of Gambia, I don't know if there are contradictions in victims' experiences, and if there can be contested visions of victimhood within Gambia. But this is certainly a risk that one has to think of. And victims also have to be, and I think it's great that ANEKED has done this, to be consulted, to be involved from the beginning in this whole process, because process is extremely important when putting together a memorialization initiative, and how to let's say make it a memorialization initiative needs to be meaningful for the people or for the experiences that it wants to acknowledge. It has to be beneficial socially and often politically. We can't forget the politics here. So how do you do it in such a way that there is dialogue, that there is a social dialogue, that you're able to also have an element of critical thinking, that it's not just in certain cases of certain memorials, you'll have imageries of victims suffering, and a lot of it, which absolutely is important, because we need to acknowledge suffering. But beyond that, beyond this element, we also need to have sometimes recognition that there has to be a certain symmetry of power in the different forms of victimizations that are presented. So a vision that is as inclusive as possible, and of not sidelining certain experiences, but also a maybe a broader vision, looking at the root causes of a particular violation, and not just the suffering as such, but the context behind it, the very often historical aspects of it. So, but it's a big question. So I hope I've answered at least partially to it.
Yes, thank you, Mina. I don't know, Nanajo, if you have anything to add, but I wanted to ask you if you could tell us more about the role survivors play in this process of social reconstruction through memorialization.
Thank you very much for this question. To answer this question, I first would like to share a story with you. I try not to get emotional. I get a bit, when I think about it, it kind of makes me quite emotional. So shortly after Yahya Jammeh came into power through a coup with his three other comrades, Edward Singate, Sadibu Haidara, and Sana Sabili, you had a young man called Usman Korosise who became Minister of Finance. And he was described as a brilliant person with integrity and seen as a rising star in the government. And his life came to an abrupt end when allegedly Yahya Jammeh, Edward Singate, and some others conspired to kill him in June 1995. And this was because he was about to disclose financial irregularities from their leadership. And the family was completely destroyed, moved a few months later to the United States, where they still live. Excuse me, the sisters of Usman Korosise actually accepted to participate in the project that we put together, and they sent an item via mail. And when it arrived, I opened the package and I found, an African print shirt that had been neatly ironed and folded. You could tell a lot of care had gone into preparing this package. So I contacted the sender. Her name is Bajan. She's one of the sisters, to let her know that I had received the package. And she responded, I'm going to have to read because I want to quote directly. She said, let me get it for you. Let me tell you, it was really hard for me to give up the shirt. I used to wear it after he passed. It is very personal for me. I had to let my son wear it one last time before I sent it to you. As I responded, okay, I can only imagine. Do you want it back after the Geneva exhibition? Do not feel bad, I understand. You can always find something else that you may have or may not. And she responded, no, I'm willing to share my brother. This really did something to me. Like when I read that, it was like a punch. There are many stories that we came across. People went through trouble to find any items that they may have left and get them to us. And that act of finding the items in itself was their participation. It's the reason why some did not have many items left. We tried to understand, but it could also be, tied loosely to religion, where in Islam it says, to avoid idolatry, you get rid of everything. It could also be loosely tied to the fact that, for many family members, other family members just came, and it's just being practical, like, okay, well, this person is no longer here, so this could go to this person, this could be used and stuff. And so people were left with very small items, or very few items, sorry. And one family even paid $75 to send express to make sure that we could make it, the item could make it on, to make it on time for the exhibition. And I don't know about the others in the audience or in the chat or who are watching this. $75 is a lot of money to send a shirt, and a baseball cap for us and for Gambians. So it was just the act in itself, I would say, of participating in something like that, and of ensuring that you are just not passive and you're very active, is making sure you're also weaving, you're being part of the narrative. And obviously what we did with this as well is to ensure that we were trying to show the human side of the impact of the dictatorship, not numbers, not stats. And when you do that, you do empower people, because we have to also think about the aim of this project. And it was to empower people. It was just, yes, to make sure that the stories out there are there. Nobody can raise them, but it was to empower them and to also show the faces of women, because they're very integral to all of this. But too often, they're left out of official narratives, or they just become numbers. And on picking on what Mina said, yeah, it's true that some perpetrators became victims. And this is something that we're still working on. And again, for us, we're like, you cannot rush into something like that. How do you also tell the stories without, adding friction or breaking this kind of vase that you're putting together? Friction without the victims. How do they get included? And so we are still having these discussions, looking at other projects, but overall, the simple fact of victims actually participating in this, and yes, I understand that it's very important for the state to recognize, for the states they have their responsibilities to take up, but the victims themselves doing this in itself, actually, it contributes to the healing, and it really does contribute to rebuilding the social reconstruction.
I was wondering if I can add something to what you were saying, because it's I mean, this makes me think of another example, which I think relates to what you were saying in another context, which is Bosnia, which is a very divided context where memorialization is very polarized and with very antagonist visions of the past, which are held by different communities. And there's one example of an exhibition where they also asked people to donate artifacts from their childhood in the war. And this was their childhood, to be more specific, in Sarajevo during the war. And everybody who brought an artifact had to have a kind of a narrative also related to that. And having seen the exhibition, what I found really interesting was that all these different artifacts had very different meanings for people. For some, they meant hope. For others, they meant commemorating somebody who died. A third person wanted to basically use this, the artifact was there to say, I was a witness. I was there and I have a duty as a witness to say what happened. So very different significations given to these artifacts, but no antagonizing narratives, no reflections of threatening identities, or this idea that you may be a victim, but you may be also a perpetrator. All these aspects were removed in that particular context. So, but which allowed for also a certain understanding that everybody suffered. There is mutual suffering here. And this is also what is important to acknowledge in a period which is very specific, which is childhood, where children are vulnerable, where children should not be suffering, right? So I found that particular exhibition really interesting to go beyond certain limits of definitions and of understandings of experiences of victimization or perpetratorhood in that sense. Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing your experience and point of view in this discussion. Now we will have like 5-10 minutes to take questions and comments from the public. So if you like to share something, you can raise your hand. I saw that Kanyana had a question. Maybe you can just ask it and like just talk and ask it to the speaker you would like to ask it.
Hi, this is Patrick Tindana, calling in from Brooklyn. Really impressed by the work ANEKED is doing. I had a question for Nanajo. So from this experience so far, what are some of the hurdles that telling the stories of Black people who were forcibly disappeared? What are some of the hurdles that you faced in the global narrative? As opposed to the other well-known or displayed stories of disappearances from the West.
Thank you. I hope I will be able to answer. I mean, my answer will be satisfactory. I think for us, it was really telling the stories in a dignified manner, without constantly going back to this narrative or just, making sure it was understood that the people who were telling their stories had not been passive, and also showing how, their humanity, how it really affected them, how it still affects them, how it affected the families. It was also bringing out trauma. I think specifically in Africa, we just glance over trauma too easily, and really tying trauma, the trauma of the family members left behind, about enforced disappearance, because a lot of people could easily say that it did not happen to you, right? And so it was really tense, or it's like, well, it's a question of perspective. To you, you're thinking that it did not happen to me, but it very much happened to me. I was the one who, I was not forcibly disappeared, but I was the one who was searching. I was the one who is still searching. I was the one who, cannot perform burial rights. I am the one who economically has been completely impacted. I am the one who, the community, it's expected. I mean, in some, we've heard stories of, families, in-laws being upset that the woman remarried. So that was the challenge of, showing these stories, because I think enforced disappearance is still not well understood as a crime, and how it does impact the families left behind, or the relatives, or other loved ones. I hope that answers the question.
It did, yes. Thanks.
If anyone have another question or comments, please come in.
Hello. This is Mohammed Sandeng from Gambia, actually, and I'd just like to throw in a little bit of words under this discussion, and I also want to how impressed I am by the work of ANEKED, and also to say that, I mean, as a victim who has had a family member disappeared, I just want to say a few things that gentleman from Brooklyn was asking about what are the hurdles that are faced.
Mehmet, are you still here? Okay, we will stay 2 more minutes online, like this we can answer him in the chat and talk with him. But
I just quickly wanted to say that actually Mohammed was included, for people watching this, he was actually included in the project. His picture is there. His father was killed and then forcibly disappeared. The remains were hidden somewhere. But yeah, so it would have been very interesting to hear what he has to say. So Mohammed, if you're still online, maybe you can write in the chat, because I think your connection is not good enough to have video and the sound at the same time. I think we lost him, or he's coming back.
I think we lost.
What I was saying is how actually, to me, I think it is a responsibility incumbent on the state to really play, a part in helping memorialization, because I mean, I think political will is one very important thing about this whole thing, because I mean, I don't know about Western societies, but I know that in Africa, I mean, governments and the state actually goes a long way to set precedents for anything that would have to be respected and recognized so much in our settings. So I think it is a responsibility incumbent on the state to put in more support for memorialization efforts, and especially considering the time that the TRRC is about to wrap up. So we expect for the government, to me, I'll say that the expectation is on the state to really put forward and encourage the idea of memorialization, because for us as victims, it is one of the very important things that will really go a long way in just delivering this process to us. So that's just my contribution, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you for your comments. We will take one last comment. Yahya Sanusi, if you want to come in.
Hello, good evening. My name is Yahya Sanusi, originally from Gambia also, living in Geneva for a little while now. Thank you very much for being part of this discussion, and then I think it's very, very important. I feel like all the work you guys are doing is really like you are doing for me. And I definitely want to thank you for that, because it's really extremely important for the victims and the Gambians also to see the justice. And also the TRRC that you are talking about. Me personally, they are doing a very fantastic job, but the results, I'm afraid that the victim will not have a result that they want. Because when you see the political aspect, and then you see the current governments like the President Adam Barrow, it's because of these victims that he could be able to get these prestigious positions. So for that being the case, I think they should do much, much more than what they are doing right now for the victims. I don't have a question, but I just wanted to demand or urge that you guys are doing really well, and then what we are doing to sensitize the Gambian citizens, ordinary Gambians, to understand, to come together as a one victims, to be able to demand their justice, because that's the most important thing. To see the perpetrator walking free is really difficult for the victims. And I think the government, to my understanding, they are not doing anything about that. Unless if I will have one question for Nana Joe, as you are interacting with the victim in the Gambia, I don't know whether, what difficulties are you facing, or together with the victims in terms of government sides, because it's been 4 years now. Some people couldn't even, like Mohammed Sande, I will agree him very well, and then thank you. You can see that how difficult Gambians are facing to even have the good communication with the family back home. You can see that he couldn't even, we barely understand what he was saying at the beginning. This is government, what the Gambian have been through all this time. And Barrow, when he came there, normally the people abroad or through the telephone, he was not having, how to call it, the Yahya Jammeh was controlling everything, everything become his. But now again, just within 4 years, we see the history is repeating itself again. So the last question that I have, do you have definitely and honestly difficulty with the government sides, or is only the victims who are with you in this process of the memorialization? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this question. I'll try and be as brief as possible, because I think we have to wrap up. So this question, it goes back to a question that was asked earlier. We have been interacted with the TRRC on this. That is that they're aware of this project. They have not been against it. They actually, they sent someone when we did our opening night in Gambia. They encouraged us. We know that they're looking into recommendations for symbolic reparations, i.e., memorization projects, and that they're looking into how they can work with CSOs and other citizens in the Gambia for that. But that will be recommendations to the government. The government can do what it wants with those recommendations. Recommendations are non-binding. I'd like to highlight as well that I do not think the TRRC is a bad institution or should not exist. I actually think it's very important. They're doing very important work. But I do think that there's certain aspects that could be improved. And, it's up to civil society as well to come in and to make sure that there is a balanced view of things. On the government side, the issue that we've had is that they decided that the TRRC was the only thing forward, and that's it. So although they say that it's not a judicial mechanism, they almost use it like a judicial mechanism. That's what it's coming across. And everything that you say, everything that you want to do is wait until the TRRC comes to an end. And the end of the TRRC coincides with election year in Gambia. And like you said, you see Barrow slowly, history is starting to repeat itself, and he wants to stay in power. He's trying to appeal to different parties, including those from Yahya Jammeh's party. So we're all watching and trying to see what's going to happen in 2021. Is he going to not implement these recommendations because he's obviously trying to be re-elected, and to be able to do that, he will try and appeal to, a certain part of the population. So in a nutshell, the government itself, when it comes to the TRRC, they haven't helped, but they haven't stopped. They've been encouraging, but they're doing so much, and they're looking into memorization. And then the government itself has really, like we say for us, decided that what we're seeing for us is that it's only the TRRC and that's it. And then they just deflect anything to the TRRC ending and their recommendations. I hope that helps with the questions. And in terms of the victims and helping them, a lot of them say they're without help. That has come up as well, and they feel abandoned. And so again, it feels like it's civil society that has to carry this on, that has to take this on. And we're trying to look into solutions, and some of them we try to refer them to the appropriate organization that could help with the specific needs that they have.
Thank you. Thank you all for your attention, and a special thank you to Mina and Nanajo, who gave us really interesting insight to think about this question of memorialization. We would have hoped to stream the documentary I Cannot Bury My Father, produced by Nanajo and Dao, but because of technical issues, we are not able to do so. I do invite you to watch it online with the link shared in the chat box, and share it with as many people as you can, so this story is well known. And I invite you again to visit our virtual exhibition, The Duty to Remember. Also, Mina wanted to share with us an information about a webinar happening soon. The flyer will be shared in the chat box too. So Mina, I just let you explain.
Okay, so yeah, this is a webinar that we're organizing because I'm, as part of the Intercentia TJ series, I'm one of the general editors there. It's a webinar organized on the issue of memory and transitional justice, memory as memorialization as a form of social restoration. So for all those who are interested, it's on the 10th of December, and you have more information in this flyer, which is in the chat.
Thank you, and thank you again for your attention. I wish you all a good evening.